as I mentioned, this is going to be an executive briefing, so it's going to be a different format from how webinars are normally run. I'm going to talk for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm going to share an idea, a tool, a thought, and then we'll have a break and we'll go back to the gallery screen and you can talk about what I've just spoken about, ask questions, make comments, etc. So we've already done the sound checks, that's great. So let's get started with your 60-minute CX makeover. And it's all about customer centricity. I'm a big fan of customer centricity. And it seems to have been a little bit of a buzzword, but it's more than that. And it's more than just a trendy new phrase everybody's talking about. And it's more than customer services, because a lot of people think customer experience, customer services, that's only for one department, that doesn't impact us. And I hope by the end of this hour together, you're going to see that it in fact impacts everybody in the organization. So customer experience, I'm quite often quoted as saying there may be customers without brands, but there are no brands without customers. And if you think about it, that's very important. There are no brands without customers. And yet we spend time in companies thinking about our products and services and far less time thinking about the customers. But without them, we wouldn't be in business. Now, a lot of companies have understood this because 90% today say that CX is going to be a primary focus for them. And 80% say they're going to be competing primarily on customer experience and improving that, which is good news. However, the good news is that 86% of customers are willing to pay more if they get better service. But in fact, today, only 1% of them say that they actually feel that vendors consistently meet their expectations. So companies and brands are promising things that they don't deliver or don't consistently deliver. And the reason I think is that there's so much choice today that if somebody is unhappy, they just go to a competitive brand or service. In fact, it's shown that 1/3 of customers leave after just one problem, one bad experience. And 2/3 of them leave after 2 or 3 bad experiences. So they're not giving us a lot of time and chance to get things right. What they do is, if they're not happy, they just go elsewhere. So the good news about that is that if you have not started on your journey to customer centricity or improving customer experience, you still have time, but know that most companies today are making it a top objective. So we need to get going. Now, one of the biggest challenges today, or I should say the 5 biggest challenges today that most businesses face is one of these 5. Either revenue decline, they fail when they try to innovate, employees aren't as engaged and motivated as they used to be, and therefore, because of all of that, we end up with budget cuts, and businesses are slow to change. And in fact, if we look at it, all of those are impacting on each other. If there's budget cuts, it's normally because revenue is declining. Revenue is declining because either employees aren't engaged, they're not giving good service, innovations are failing, or business it's just not keeping up with how business and the environment is changing. The good news is that if you get customer experience right and adopt a customer-first strategy, it's going to have a positive impact on all 5 of these major business challenges. Customer experience has been shown to increase revenues 12 to 15%. Innovation rate, which as you know, absolutely stinks. Most innovations fail. And in fact, about 5% on average succeed first time round. It's going to increase a lot more. Employee engagement is going to increase. Your budgets, I'm going to share with you how you can save up to 2/3 of your budget just by making one small change, one small action that I'm going to share with you. And you can implement changes faster. And the reason I feel comfortable sharing that customer experience and the impact it will have on business is because of my experience. I help organizations think about customer centricity, but most of them and most of my clients come because they're not enjoying the results that they expected. They heard, for instance, that they are going to increase revenues 12 to 15%, but they don't. And then they come to me and say, what's going wrong? I think one of the problems with adopting a customer-first strategy today is that most companies, and I think I mentioned it before, most companies think of customer experience as the interaction between the company and the customer. But that's a very limited perspective. And as a result, customer experience is something that doesn't change. It's totally static. It tends to be siloed. It's either in customer services or perhaps in marketing, because quite often marketing looks after customer services. And it's a very linear process. You do this, the customer contacts us here, and it's only a very small part of the whole organization that's impacted. And that isn't going to work because consumers, customers today are interacting with companies on an almost daily basis. So the new model that I want to share is called QC2, which is Quantum Customer Centricity. And I'm really excited about it, and it's been getting rave reviews because it's dynamic, it's multidimensional, and above all, it involves connectedness. And as I said, this is what's going wrong in most organizations. So the model, QC2, was inspired by, in fact, the very foundation of the universe, in other words, the atom. I took inspiration from the world around us because I thought customers are, in fact, the nucleus. They are and should be the center of every organization. And then the company itself, how it works, the brands and the processes they use, all interact with each other and with the customer. So I like to look at that like the company, the brands and the processes are electrons that revolve around, circulate around the nucleus of customers, and they interact with each other. And QC2 works because it reflects the dynamic, ever-changing interrelationships between these four elements. And when they're working in harmony, amazing quantum results are achieved. But when they're out of sync, they can vibrate out of control, just like an atom, and collide with devastating consequences. So I hope that makes sense to you. This is a new model, and I'm very excited. And as I said, the people I've shared it with so far are very excited and are using a lot of the tools. And I'm going to be sharing some examples from clients that are already working with it. Mm-hmm. But before I go into actually sharing these different tools with you, I wanted to understand, first of all, where have companies been going wrong? Why have we been going wrong in taking this very limited customer-company interaction as being what customer service, customer centricity is all about? And I did the research, so you don't have to. And this is actually what I found. I found that the so-called CX gurus around the world, a majority men, and most of them are working and living in the US. Now that's already very biased, but it could still work, except for the other points here. Most of them have less than 7 years experience, and 1/3 of them don't even have any corporate experience. They've gone straight from university or college or whatever into advising companies without actually having done the job themselves. So how can they tell you what to do if they haven't been in your shoes, if they've never faced the challenges that you face. And therefore, I would question, why are we following their recommendations? We shouldn't, because they're not working anyway. So I think that explains why a lot of companies that have adopted a customer-first strategy aren't seeing the results that they expected. Now, if you compare that with my own experience, it's vastly different. My career up until 10 years ago was in fast-moving consumer goods, companies such as Philip Morris International, Nestle, and Gillette, which is part of the P&G group now. It wasn't when I was working for them. And when I set up my consultancy 10 years ago, I continued working with these multinationals as well as with others such as Coca-Cola, Unilever, Carlsberg, as well as some small, medium-sized companies, not only in food and beverages, but also in pharmaceuticals such as Biosensors International. I also very quickly got academic recognition and invitations to lecture at universities all over the world. And as a result, I've lectured in Miami, in Shanghai, Beijing, Delhi, Lima, all over the world. And I feel for me that gives me extra confidence that what I'm talking about is academically sound. It's not just sound from my experience in the field, it's also works as far as the academia is concerned. Now, I've worked in 127 countries to date, so I know the similarities and differences between customers wherever in the world you might be working. And I actually wrote a book on it, on customer centricity, called Winning Customer Centricity, with Paul Polman, who at the time was CEO of Unilever, called A Must-Read for Today's and Tomorrow's Marketeers. And it's a very different type of customer business book. It has 50 chapters, but each chapter is only 2 pages long. So if you're interested, let me know, and I'd be happy to send you a complimentary copy. So
that would be great.
That would be wonderful. If you're interested, then Saskia, that I will send you, no problem at all. So I just want to get into a little bit about the makeover. I wanted to give you this background because I think it's important to know where I come from, what my experience is, so that you understand that you can have confidence in what I'm talking about. So as far as traditional CX being very much static, as my 2 cats here looking at the world go by, the problem is that customers aren't static. And in fact, almost all CEOs say that their business can't keep up with the way customers are changing today, which is a really serious thing. Now, customers are changing in many, many ways. I've given a couple of ideas here. I mean, we all want things faster, don't we? We want more answers faster. We want products and services faster. We want new ideas to be brought to market faster. We want things cheaper. And in fact, 50 to 70% of us feel worse off than we did pre-COVID. Inflation is looming in many countries today, and therefore we're looking for cheap prices. So we've become smarter shoppers. We use discounts. We check for them online. If it's anything important, high value, we tend to check online. We see where the cheapest place is to buy it. And in fact, we have a very hybrid approach to shopping these days. We will buy online almost as much as we do offline in store, or we maybe check in store to make sure it's the product we want, and then we'll buy online. And
Right.
finally, we've become far more responsible, and it's not we've become, yes, sensitive to impact of climate change, but we also are watching how companies are acting and if they're responsible. How are they sourcing products? How are they using resources? And are they socially and environmentally responsible? So imagine what it would do for your business if you were ready to meet customers' needs and wants with exactly the right offer at the right time, every time. It is, in fact, what marketing is all about. Now, one area where being dynamic and up to speed, if not ahead of customers, is, of course, in innovation. So a question for you, Saskia and Ed, how often do you launch new products or services? Every year, every 2 to 3 years, every 4 to 6 years, or less often? And what percentage of them succeed? Now, hopefully, I can get the polls to come up, but as we're only 2 of you with me, you unmute yourself and let me know what's your rhythm of innovation today? Saskia, would you like to start?
Sure. I would say between every 2 to 3 years. Because I work with a company that is very into IT environments, etc. So we try to keep on, well, stay on the ball, so to speak. But it's also important to make sure that the product is successful, that it actually works together with other products, and that it's actually feasible to roll out. So I'd say every 2 to 3 years, and I'd say, yeah, success rate is about 65 to 70%.
Fantastic, fantastic. Because as you know, in most industries, the success rate's about 5%. So Ed, would you like to say anything? Don't know if you've got your unmute your no, you're muted still. You can unmute. Let me unmute you. No. Okay. Don't worry, some people are shy. That's no problem. Okay, Ed, you can add your comment into the chat if you prefer to chat rather than speak. No problem at all. Okay, so as I said, the innovation success rate is very, very low, and I think there are many reasons why so many companies fail. I think, first of all, quite often they use an innovation pipeline, something that looks like this. And as far as I'm concerned, I can tell you that one of the reasons is that it's aligned. What happens is companies have lots of ideas, they narrow it down, and they'll end up launching a product. And of course, the problem with that is they could have lots of great ideas and they get rid of all but one, or the opposite, they end up choosing the least bad, but they still launch something that's not going to work. Another reason is this. The ideation quite often starts in the organization. So it's internal, it's not an external perspective. And quite often it comes because it's internal expertise and skills that the company already has. Right. And as a result, it tends, as I said, to be renovations rather than innovations. And another reason is that in most cases, the customer's not involved. Quite often, maybe the customer comes in here at concept development and testing, and then they might come in here post-launch to measure how successful the product has been. But by that time, it's too late. So what happens is the company will have to adapt, whether it's the product or service or their communication, and then they relaunch. But that is such a waste of resources, energy, time. Wouldn't it be better if you knew that it was going to work, and as a result, you could go straight into your next innovation process? So what we do in QC2 is we use what we call the virtuous circle. Everything starts with the customer and insight development. And when we've identified the opportunity, we then follow a very similar plan to the funnel, but we've started from the customer perspective. And therefore, we can test as we go along. And one area that quite often is missed out is this portfolio optimization. Because in most organizations, they are constantly adding new products and services. And a much better model is the 80-20, the 90-10 rule. In other words, when you add in a new product or service, you should take off the ones that are not working. And that is something that is always missing out on most organizations. So I want to share, just keep an eye out if you've got any comments or questions. As it's an intimate group, you don't need to put them into chat. I'll do a little break after this. I just want to share with you first an example that comes from one of my clients who is in the cola business. It's one of the leading cola manufacturers. And they contacted me because they wanted to expand their offer. Customers were getting a little bit nervous about colas, and they were looking for healthier soft drinks. And they were thinking about, why don't we have fruit-flavored soft drink? So I worked with them, and we used, one of the tools we used is what I call my zoom in and zoom out. Most companies, if they're looking to launch, in this case, a fruit-flavored soft drink, would look at fruit-flavored soft drinks. But I said to them, no, let's start up here at beverages. And then we're going to look at all the different segments and where our new product idea would come in. So we looked at all beverages, cold beverages, non-alcoholic beverages, carbonated soft drinks, and finally fruit-flavored soft drinks. And as a result of that, we actually found that the product they were thinking of making had a very high percentage of juice. It wasn't just juice flavored. It had a very high content of juice. And consumers saw it as a healthier energy drink because it had vitamins, it had sugar, so it had natural sugars. So consumers saw this as a very healthy alternative to energy drinks. They launched with that positioning, and it was a huge success. Just to mention on the other side, the zoom in, zoom out, you can also do what we call a zoom out. And this example comes from a coffee manufacturer that was launching capsules. And in working with the tool, they went on to launch capsules, first of all, for other hot drinks, then cold drinks. Then they adapted it for babies, for seniors, and even for athletes. And they launched a couple of years ago capsules for adding supplements into coffee and other things. So this is a very powerful tool that can be used to help with innovation or for identifying new products and new product ideas. So I'm just going to go out of the presentation for now, and let's have a little chat about the topic of innovation in general. Ed and Saskia, what any comments about the idea of using the virtuous circle rather than the funnel, and if that would help you and your innovation process at all? Ed, would you like to say something? No, okay. Saskia?
Yeah. I think the funnel is a bit outdated. I think it's important to see the bigger picture and not only involve the customers, but also the internal customers, get the people involved within the company and get them exposed to what we're building or what is being done and how we're doing it. And I think that makes a bigger impact, not just on the product itself, but in the entire company as a motivational tool, and for them to also experience what's going on. I think it's not a case anymore of this is my job, this is what I do, and this is my square anymore. It doesn't work like that. And especially the way things are moving, as you mentioned, you've got to be faster, smarter, better. And that all needs to be taken into consideration. So involving the customer in more steps, and this I also speak of from a product management experience, is that it helps the product be better, faster. And you get results quicker. And obviously this is my personal experience, so I may not be 100% correct, but it makes a difference. It really does.
It does. You obviously have seen my presentation, because I'm going to be talking about another tool and talking about the importance of having a support group within your organization, exactly for that reason, because it's not only the different departments within an organization have different ideas, but they also have different information and different perspectives. And the products and services are much richer if we, and thank you for mentioning it, it's vital that we have the customer input, but it's also vital that the whole organization and not just one department is looking at innovation. So thank you for that comment. It's a great addition. I will steal and make sure I mention that next time.
Good. Do that.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
Nope. I'm good.
Okay. Well, let's get back to talking about, in fact, this problem of silos. Now, this is how most companies, in the same way as the innovation funnel was linear, this is the old way of looking at consumer experience. They hear about a product, they consider it, they buy it, and then if they like it, they'll tell other people about it. But as we know today, it looks more like this. This is the customer journey, and it goes in between internal and external information sources, experience. It can be within the company, it can be from friends, colleagues, reviews online. So there's a lot of backwards and forwards before somebody makes the decision to buy something. And this means that a customer, before they buy, are going to be interacting with many different people from different departments. But whereas we see different departments, the customer just sees one company. And that's the big difference. And I'm sure you've had the same experience as I have when I've called up about a problem I've got, and I speak to a different person and I have to explain all over again what my problem is, because they're just not integrating information, perhaps between sales and marketing or operations or after sales service. And the problem is that in most organizations, departments are like little silos and they don't talk to each other. And just Saskia, as you mentioned, it's so important to involve the whole organization. It doesn't matter which department you're in, because in fact, everybody in the organization has a role to play in satisfying and hopefully delighting the customer. If we think about it, finance, for instance, if we have problems with pricing or invoicing or after sales, we're likely to talk as a customer to somebody in finance. IT, if we have problems with the websites, or we're getting too many or too few text messages or ones that aren't relevant for us, or digital connections, everything happens on the web these days. We might end up talking to somebody in IT. Marketing, obviously, is communications, innovation, etc. We're more used to working with them. But sales, the same, product and service description, fulfillment, retail, and operations to deliver what customers want. So everybody's having a role to play, and they all bring different information and different perspectives. Now, the only way that an organization is going to be customer-centric is if it starts at the top. It needs to be a top-down role model, if you like, of the CEO and the executive board to think customer first and then everybody else in the organization will be encouraged to think customer first. Now, one of the ways they can do this is by making sure that their mission and vision, the statements that they share with employees, talks about the customer. Now, here are a couple of mission statements from a couple of companies. The first one, Wells Fargo: we want to satisfy our customers' financial needs and help them succeed financially. Now, they do mention the customer, but they mention finance twice as often. And more importantly, to be honest, that mission statement could work for any organization in finance, couldn't it? It's not very specific to why should I go do my business with Wells Fargo and not with another bank? Uber is the opposite extreme. We ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. The first time I read this mission statement, I thought it was for an airline or something like that, because they're putting the world in motion. Maybe it could be a car manufacturer. They're certainly not talking about the customers. I think a mission statement that said, we get the customer where they need to be on time without any surprises. Because I use Uber a lot, I travel on my own a lot, and I love the fact I don't have to think about local money, currency, or that a taxi driver will take the long road. And therefore, it makes me relaxed. So I think their mission statement could be far more powerful if they talked about what they do for the customer. Now, if we compare this with two companies that are well known as being customer-centric, Zappos, which was bought a few years ago by Amazon, which is another customer-centric company. Zappos says to provide the best customer service possible, deliver well through service, and well is their model for customer service. And Southwest, dedication to the highest quality of customer service, delivered with a sense of warmth, friendliness, individual pride, and company spirit. Now, I don't know about you, but those two mission statements would make me feel proud to work for the organization. I think we would all love to wow our customers, to be the most customer-centric company, to give the highest quality of customer service. So I want to ask you to either pull out if you already got your mission statement, or if you can think about your mission statement, what does it talk about? Does it talk about your product, your service you offer, the price, the place, the people? Is it a mission statement that is inspiring? Would it motivate employees to delight the customer? Would it make employees feel proud to work for the organization? So what about Ed, Saskia? Do you know what your mission statements are? Does it mention your customers? Does it motivate you and inspire you? Either of you like to say anything there? Okay. Well, have a look. Yes, Saskia?
Our mission statement is very short and sweet. It's being a German company, it's also a bit rigid. So it could be improved on.
Good. Well, hopefully, I've given you some ideas about how to, it needs to be obviously value-based, benefit-based, talk about the customers and what you are doing for them in a way that's going to inspire and motivate the employees to do that job. Because of course, it's not management that does it, it's the employees on the ground that will deliver the service, the products, and the aftercare to the customer. So
Correct.
It needs to be something that will motivate the customer, all employees, to deliver the best experience for customers. So I mentioned earlier on about QC2, Quantum Customer Centricity, being based on the atom. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this is because it's been shown that if we make smaller atomic changes, there's less resistance from employees if it's less dramatic. And in fact, 70% of employees will embrace incremental changes compared to large-scale transformations. So it means that organizations that implement smaller changes have 25% higher employee engagement than those relying on these big transformations. And I mean, we're all human. We don't like to be disrupted. We like our comfort and our comfort zone. Therefore, it's important that when we bring change, we make small changes and we give employees time to adjust to what we're trying to do. And what's interesting is that if we do that, companies that have a highly engaged workforce have 21% higher profitability. So think about it. Just by making smaller changes instead of these big radical changes all the time that some organizations, they don't change for 5 or 10 years and then make huge changes and then wonder why they don't succeed. And this is the reason, because employees aren't following. So it turns out that, in fact, what's good for the customer, making small changes and adapting how we work to answer customer needs, is actually good for employees and therefore good for business. So when you're committed to making the customer the nucleus of your business, it results in higher employee engagement, a more positive work culture, and employees finally understand what their role is in pleasing, delighting, satisfying the customer. And I think that's so important because most up until now, as I said, customer experience, customer centricity tended to look at this very limited customer company interaction of customer services. So another break just to see if anybody has any comments about that. Saskia or Ed?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. The third point I want to talk about is saving you money. So we looked at the interaction of customers during their purchase journey with different departments. And we talked about customers seeing one company, not multiple departments, and how frustrated they can be if they have to keep giving information every time they talk to a new person. And if you think about it, one of the things that all those interactions have in common is that it provides us with information, with data.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, the data tends to stay in those silos we talked about earlier, depending upon which department the customer is talking to. They own the data, they keep their data. And Saskia, as you mentioned, it's so much more helpful if people share information. And that's what I want to talk about today. And one of the reasons about the importance of sharing information is that more than 2/3 of budgets that are spent on gathering data and information is wasted because they're not being used. So think about the money that you spend today on market research, industry reports, and other data gathering. If you could save 25% of that budget, 50%, 70% of that budget, think about what you could do with that money. Now, one client I went into work for, one of the things I quite often do when we're looking at analyzing vast amounts of data is I first of all find out what information is available within the organization. And in this particular case, I was absolutely shocked. Not about the amount of money, I mean, that was shocking, the amount of money, but they were spending for gathering data, making market research, buying industry reports. Because what I found in talking to different departments is that they were all buying the same industry report, but they were keeping it in the department in which it was bought. Now, the supplier of that report didn't say, oh, you've already bought that report. You want the report? Let me sell it to you. They were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to buy that one report. So you can imagine, before I even started working on the project, we had saved much more than I was getting paid to help them. And obviously their supplier wasn't terribly happy, but I told them I wasn't very happy with them because they should have said that the company had already bought the report.
Right.
Now, as I said, that was just the beginning of the work we were doing. Another example, this is from a pharma company, a client that was doing an annual UNA or usage and awareness study. And I don't know if you buy UNA studies, but what tends to happen? You do the research, you get the report, you celebrate if the numbers go up, you commiserate if the numbers go down, and then you put the report on your shelf or you file it away on your PC, never to be opened again until the following year when you repeat the study. Now, this particular client was or is working in pharma, and they were targeting hospitals and doctors. They were number 3 in the marketplace, and number 1 and 2 were fighting for leadership in the category. And they wanted to find a way to challenge what the number 1 and 2 they wanted to grow, obviously. The problem was they had about 15% market share, was 15-20% market share, and number 1 and 2 were fighting at about 35% of the market each. And therefore, they had almost twice the budget, the number 1 and 2, and they had almost twice the number of reps. So this number 3, my client, needed a way to understand how they could compete with lower budgets and lower numbers of reps. So what we did is we looked at not only their UNA study, but all the other information they had, and we were able to identify a new form of communication that not only did the doctors love and would like more of, but number 1 and 2 competitors weren't using it because they were concentrating on reps visits. And of course, reps visits, they were interrupting the doctor in their day-to-day work. So the doctors weren't happy and the reps were being a little bit forceful. So the number 3 coming out with this new communication strategy, it was in fact running webinars on demand. So it was recorded and they could run the webinar, but also doctors, if they weren't able to watch it live, could watch a replay. The doctors got the information they needed when they were ready. They weren't interrupted in their day-to-day working by reps visits. And the sales force loved it because although there were less reps, the sales force finally had something to talk about that the doctors loved hearing about. So it was a total win-win. And the process that we used to do this is what QC2 calls CatSight. And this is Saskia that I mentioned earlier that I mentioned about the support team, and you said this was important also for innovation. But in fact, whatever challenge we're looking at, we use CatSight, which starts with what is the category we're going to look at, what is the aim or objective of the customer in buying that product or service, identifying the target group we're going to be looking at, and then bringing together a support team within the organization of people that have information or experience of this target customer and category. And then another step that unfortunately we seem to have forgotten this day, we talk to customers. And finally, at step 6 out of 7 steps, CatSight's a 7-step process, only in step 6 do we actually fill any information gaps. Once we've got all that information and we've spoken to customers, if we need more information, then we'll go and buy the information. And in fact, this is a very powerful process that will work for any challenge that a company has, because it involves the whole organization, involves the customer, and is concentrated on what is the aim or objective that the customer has. What solution are they looking for that we can provide them with? Now, when I go around organizations, I hear all the time, if only we knew what we know. And by using the CAT-SIGHT process, what's amazing is, as I said, number 4 step, when you know what category and target customer you're going after and what their aim or objective is in buying your product or service, is you get that support team. Just Saskia, as you mentioned, for innovation, it in fact is very important for every other job you run within the organization. So another break. Going to put you back on gallery. Saskia, Ed, any comments?
Not from me, not at the moment, thanks.
Okay, Ed, you've been very quiet. Okay. No, fine, all right. So let's get back to the final couple of things I wanted to share with you. And that is to summarize what QC2 can do for businesses and for customers, their customers. As I've said, it saves money because most of the time we don't know what we know. It has a number of solutions and we tend to integrate rather than replace, unless a company wants to replace a process or solution that they're currently using. But in most cases, the idea of quantum customer centricity is we take those small atomic steps. We make small improvements. It means that the employee normally is ready to get on board. It disrupts work less, and it has impact that, because it can be so quickly integrated into what's currently being done within the business, it makes things faster, smarter, and employees tend to be happier with it. It also motivates and inspires employees because they're involved. Everything we do in QC2 involves people, whether it's the customer, management, employees. Everybody has their role to play in understanding the customer and the company and making sure they work together for the good of the business and the good of the customer. So if you look back at the challenges we spoke about at the beginning, hopefully you can see that QCT can answer all of these different challenges by making small atomic changes that tend to be implemented far, far faster than these larger changes that some organizations want to make. It saves money, it saves time. So if you'd like to hear more about it, if you've already completed the QC2 evaluator, then I'd be happy to go through your results in more detail. If you haven't, then go through, you have the link in one of the emails, or I can send it to you, and book some time on c3centricity.com contact, and you can pick a time in my agenda to speak. And let me just going to jump this slide. And if you prefer to write to me with email, Ed, you don't seem to be very comfortable speaking. Maybe English is not your first language. But you can also email me at deniseddd@c3centricity.com. And as I said before that, you can run that free assessment to find out what are your biggest opportunities for improvement. And that way we can look at getting you 3 actions that you can immediately take to improve the situation. So that is what I wanted to share with you. I'm now going to open it up for discussion generally, and happy to take any questions you've got.
No, thanks very much, Denise. I found it very interesting. It's more or less where I'm at. Think-wise, company-wise, it's a bit of a different story.
That's why you're there, Saskia.
Yeah, hopefully. But thank you very much for your time and sharing all your ideas and how you go about things yourself. I'll definitely get onto the review, and yes, let's see what happens. But thanks again. Very interesting.
That's okay. And you've got my email address now, denise.dd@c3centricity.com. And if you go on to the website, if you want to have a chat, just book some time. I'd love to chat more with you when you've had time to think about it. And thank you for your participation, because Ed, you've been very quiet. As I said, I've worked in so many countries. I know that some people are a little shy, or maybe the language barrier. So I hope you enjoyed it as well. And Saskia, I look forward to maybe catching up with you in the future. Thanks
That would be
for
great.
joining, and
Yes.
look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye-bye.